Guys, and welcome to a special episode of Robostoph's Fireside Book Chat. Um, normally on Fireside Book Chat, I do book reviews while sitting next to a nice, cozy fire. But recently I read The Road by Cormac McCarthy and decided, you know what? It's a nice, dreary day out here in the middle of nowhere, and maybe I'll do my book review for this one in the same setting that happened in the book, minus the fiery ash and brimstone. Right, so to summarize this book, you have a man and his boy in a post-apocalyptic world, and they are walking towards the coast on the road. We really don't know much about the world or how it ended in this book, but we do get the sense that it's a couple years after the apocalypse, and the boy and the man are all that's left of this little family, and they encounter some dangers along the road, um, as well as people who are not necessarily trustworthy. They scavenge for supplies and pretty much just make little efforts each day to hold on for a little bit longer. And as the book goes, the more and more unlikely it seems that they will survive. Some spoilers. In the end, they do make it to the coast. And it's never really presented exactly why they go to the coast. But it deals with some important themes throughout the book. And the boy kind of keeps the man centered, because the man is morally gray in the sense that, he's going to do whatever it takes to survive. But there's certain lines that the boy prevents him from crossing throughout the book, which I thought was cool. Um, but also a little bit of the other impression, in the sense that the man has to toughen this boy up, and prepare him for survival in this world, and get him to make hard decisions. And I think that's something that's pretty relatable as a parent. So as a parent, that is exactly why this book appealed to me in that sense as a father, because it forces you to ask some questions in regards to what you're willing to do as a parent, and what type of world you're going to leave your children behind in. And if you don't prepare them to the best of your ability for the world, then perhaps you failed them, right? And you've done them a disservice, by not showing them how to survive in the world without you as their parent. Now, one thing that happens in this book, especially in terms of the fate of the father, is something that I toil with very often. And I think all parents do, is we ask that question. If I die today, what state do I leave my children behind in? And it's weird to think that there's a world where you're not always going to be there for them. And you hope that the natural process of life, and generations, be that as they may, respond to the correct timeline. But there's no guarantee, right? Like, it happens all the time where you don't get to live the life that you thought you were going to. And things take unexpected turns, and people die unexpectedly. And it's terrifying to think that one day it may be you, right? And it may be your child that's left without you, their backbone. And I could tell you, every once in a while, I'll be driving to work, and that very thought will overwhelm me, and I'll tear up a little bit because I'm not ready to leave my kids behind, And I identify with the struggle of the father in this book, because that's exactly how I feel every day. That I have to go out there and do everything I can to not just ensure my children's survival today, but post me as well. And I think every parent goes through that. So this story spoke to me on that level, and I really enjoyed it for that reason. But it's not a perfect book. In terms of storytelling, I feel like the book was probably about twice as long as it should have been, given the simple nature of the plot. They didn't make it bad. Storytelling is fine. It's just a little bit long for the story that you're getting. And since there's only two characters, the dialogue is very simple, which is also fine. I don't have these deep, conversations with my kids every day and try to hammer on all these quotable points. I don't think that's the point. So the dialogue's realistic, but where the story really suffered for me was with the boy himself, because we get the impression that this post-apocalyptic world is at least a couple years into it, right? And the child seems brand new to it all. Um, and given his age, I think he's probably like 9 or 10 or something. Children are much more resilient than they're given credit for, and they're very adaptable. So put into an environment where a post-apocalyptic world is all they've ever known, I felt like the kid was just unbelievably naive and useless, if I were to be honest. So that kind of hurt the book, in my opinion, because it didn't sell the fact that this apocalypse was a couple years into it because of how uh, lost the kid is throughout the entire thing, emotionally and in terms of what he brings to the table in regards to their ability to survive this journey on the road. Now, as a father, sometimes the opposite is true, right? Where your kids do heavily depend on you. I didn't feel like that was a great representation of a few years into the post-apocalypse, right? But um, so in terms of the story kind of falling flat a little bit in terms of plot, they encounter some things along the way, some danger, and it's usually exciting throughout the book, but it's not the most exciting thing. And it's been heavily criticized for its similarity to other stories, and it seems like I keep bringing up Harlan Ellison and all this, but it's been criticized as being sort of a knockoff of his story of A Boy and His Dog, which I haven't read yet. I plan to because I do like Harlan Ellison, but it seems like he always has his name in there somewhere in terms of somebody knocking him off, and he's just one of those guys that must be the most original dudes in the world. But trust me, all of his stories are inspired by something too. So I try not to take away too many points from books when I talk about them from their similarity to other things, unless it's blatant, because there's only so many stories you can tell, and it happens, especially with something so simple as a boy and his father walking down the road. Well, the only way you can spice that up is if they have a telepathic dog. So I'll probably have to turn back now as the rain has really made it difficult to use my phone out here and on the road. But again, it's an exciting adventure, and it's cool being out here in the elements, kind of reflecting upon this book where the future is not guaranteed and tomorrow is not guaranteed. And like I said, what sacrifices would you be willing to make for the survival of your child? Most of us would say anything. We would do anything for our children, and that's absolutely true. But sometimes we depend on our children to make us see the beauty of the world, to bring us back to reality, and say, no, Dad, that's not right. We have to do better. And I can tell you, my own children challenge me in that way all the time, and I am not a perfect father, not even by a long stretch, and they would tell you. But I try, my hardest to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And how you conduct yourself, not just in the end of the world, but throughout life in general. I mean, you're your child's only impression of this world for the longest time. And I think that's kind of what this book was trying to say. So how they see the world, their worldview is largely shaped by who you are as a parent, especially as a father. And you will see the light in their eyes sometimes. The world makes us old people kind of bitter and gray in a lot of areas. But children sort of reignite that spark in our faith in humanity sometimes when you see a kid who's usually this wild, wretched, evil little being go off and do something that's also incredibly nice and full of heart and warmth. And it reminds you that there's more to humanity than just survival, right? There's this connection to other people and things that we got to do to make sure that, we don't just live, right? But we live as our best selves, and our sense of integrity is often compromised. Our courage, we let the world shape us sometimes. So your resilience is largely dependent on how much you're willing to go out there and say, you know what, I'm going to do the right thing for me and my child, even if it costs us something. And you got to be prepared to do that every day to some degree. And I think that's one of the hardest, most rewarding parts of being a good parent, is showing them that through adversity, you are not going to compromise your beliefs, right? So you do have to stand for something, especially as a parent. And I'm always searching. Everybody's always searching for what does it mean to be me.
And sometimes you don't find out until you're getting shit kicked in and you're out there up against the real world on the road with nothing but you and yourself and those that are watching you. Now, with that being said, I think we've all been in situations where we didn't turn out to be the people that we thought we were. And we sort of have to live with that every day, right? Where we can think back to times where we didn't behave as our best selves. I mean, we didn't represent the moral code of conduct that we've established. But the important thing is that you are trying to establish it and that you've put that effort into being better and being your best self at all times. And it's not always possible, right? Sometimes you find yourselves in compromising situations. That's why they're compromising situations. You weren't your best self today because somebody forced you. Or not even that they forced you, that you just fell short of who you planned to be, right? You thought something and it went the other way. And you raised your voice, you struck somebody, or you did something that was something you knew to be wrong. And not everybody has this built-in compass, right? Some of us really struggle with that. And we can look to God, we can look to religion, we can look to our elders for guidance, but they're not always there. And that's one of those important things about the road, right? Where the only thing that this kid has to look for to be his shining light through all this is his father. So his father has to do everything he can to make sure that his boy is ready. And not ready just to live, but to carry this light that they keep talking about. And that's powerful stuff. So again, if you haven't read this one, it doesn't seem that deep on the surface, but it challenges you in some ways to think like that. So that being said, I really like this one. Go check it out. Cormac McCarthy's The Road.